the Healing Advocacy Fund, a 501c3 nonprofit that was formed immediately after the passage of Measure 109. Measure 109 was the campaign in Oregon that passed in 2020 to license and regulate the first ever psilocybin therapy program at the state level. And so we're going to talk about that today. So first, as I think it's probably to no one's surprise, a lot of people are suffering across the country. The mental health epidemic only was compounded in COVID, and specifically in Oregon, we have one of the highest rates of this mental health crisis, and Oregon's mental health crisis was third worst in the country. So there's a lot of people suffering across the country, but uniquely in Oregon. And one of the ways in which we started to frame addressing that was by highlighting the research, right? These are some of the questions that we asked ourselves. What do people really need to know to be able to better understand the opportunity for psychedelic healing? And so, the first thing that we really wanted to get to that our polling told us that we needed to be able to provide was education on the research, right? This has been talked about a lot at this conference. This is something that the demographic that we know we needed to reach really needed to hear this. And the demographic that I'm talking about, I often refer to as the soccer moms and grandparents. If they don't vote with us, we don't win. So we really need to speak to that audience. And when we are able to highlight the research and the promise that psilocybin has been shown at prestigious institutions that we've heard about, including Johns Hopkins, UCLA, the University of Alabama, right? We kind of, depending on who the audience is, we get to pick the universities that are working on this research and lifting that up. In addition to what I personally believe is the hypocrisy of psilocybin being in a Schedule I drug. The FDA, as mentioned before, classifying psilocybin as a breakthrough therapy for depression really highlighted the fact that psilocybin being in a Schedule I designation was not a medical designation. It's a political one. And the people in Oregon really got to better understand that, and it actually helped us lay the groundwork for the additional education that was required. So the first component for successful education was the research. The second, facts about the measure. As a state legal, an adult use cannabis state, the first reaction that we got from a lot of voters was, you're gonna sell mushrooms in retail stores? No, actually, we're not. That's not even close to the truth. And so we often had to start with what the measure was not. And then we would lead into the carefully crafted framework in which the measure was, right? So the overall goal of the measure was create a licensing framework to serve those who seek psilocybin therapy that can benefit from it. So a couple of things about what the measure does. It establishes a regulatory framework within the Oregon Health Authority to allow trained and licensed practitioners to administer psilocybin at licensed service centers. It also established a governor-appointed psilocybin advisory board made up of numerous experts from people in the medical field to people from indigenous communities to bring the entire field of knowledge together to craft a program and a new path forward that says, just because you are a 30-year therapist and you have existing credentials does not necessarily mean that you know how psilocybin works or you know how it has been used in the indigenous communities for thousands of years. And conversely, just because you've been doing 30 years of really good underground work does not necessarily mean you are ready to provide services to the general public in an ethical and licensed regulated manner. The Oregon program creates a path for that entire field to participate. And we truly believe that that is a model that is needed in order to provide as much access to as many people as possible. We have to create space for the communities in which we want to serve to be served by people in their own community. And that's a theme that I think you're going to hear a lot, and that's a theme that is easier said than done, but it is our challenge in Oregon that is our opportunity. And so I think that that is something that we really want to instill and that we're starting to see in other states that are moving forward as well. Additional aspects about the measure, we've been going through 2 years of rulemaking. As the first state to move forward with a program like this, we understood the responsibility that we have in going first, right? We're not trying to hit home runs in the top of the first inning here. There's a lot of bad things that can happen when you have that mentality. So we took 2 years, and we're going to talk a little bit about the rulemaking process a little bit later, but we really wanted to get this foundation right. Not perfect, but a foundation based in safety, quality, and access that can withstand the test of time, that can be worthy of replication. Whether we get this right and we create a golden standard in Oregon, or we screw it up, it will be replicated for years to come. And that's why we take our responsibility in Oregon so seriously. So the measure also requires the establishment of training and licensure systems for service centers, manufacturers, testing labs, and facilitators. Those are the 4 license types. And then also requires a tracking system for all psilocybin products. As I said before, sometimes it's just as important to start with what our measure does not do. So our measure does not allow the retail sales of psilocybin. Psilocybin will not be leaving the premise of a service center at all. There is no off-site consumption, possession, or production of psilocybin. I do want to take a note for those who are not familiar with the Oregon politics in 2020. We had an accompanying measure, Measure 110, which did decriminalize small possession of almost all drugs. There is still a gap that I want to acknowledge between decriminalizing small possession and creating a licensed psilocybin therapy framework. That gap is something that we are very conscious of, and we believe we are going to be able to expand this program both from an expansion of decriminalization and an expansion of the regulated space to allow for all forms of healing to take place. We have to start somewhere, but the long-term vision is there, and it really is going to require stakeholders from every community, whether we agree, or more importantly, when we disagree, to agree to talk about our disagreements, right? That is so essential for having a productive conversation that can really advance the entire movement forward. There are branding and advertising of products will not be allowed to a mostly degree. Unregulated, untracked production. Service centers have to be outside of 1,000 feet of schools, and you have to be over the age of 21 in order to receive access to services. So this is a very simplified 4-step process of what it will look like to access psilocybin services in Oregon. The first step is the assessment, right? This is where essentially someone will be able to fill out a form that includes their background, their interest, things that will help a prospective facilitator identify whether or not they're the right fit. This really gets back to what I said before about the importance of not only ensuring that we have the right people that have the right experience to be working with a client, but that we really have an opportunity to match people that are coming from the same communities together, right? We've heard so much about not only the inequitable access generally, but the trauma that can be and has been caused by forcing communities to try and work together that maybe were the cause of their original trauma, right? And again, this is far easier said than done, but this assessment and this matching and the incentivization of this matching is essential to providing a safe and comfortable environment for psilocybin therapy to really be able to hold and meet the promise that we believe it has. Number 2 is intention setting. This is where a client will meet with a facilitator to really better understand what is this going to be like, right? What are my goals? How am I going to be preparing for this? And so that's the next step. Third is the administration session itself. This is where, again, the services will take place at a service center, and the integration afterwards, of course, where people will meet to unpack their experience and really gain the longer-term benefits of that administration session. So again, we talked about the importance of education. These are the 4 questions that we answered during the campaign, as I spoke before, that really led to our success. What is psilocybin? What does the research say? What does the measure do and not do? And last but not least, who stands to benefit from having access to this? Whether you think psilocybin is for you or you're totally anti-drugs in general, we learned in Oregon, everyone has someone that they love that stands to benefit from having access to this. And when you can show that to them, we can move hearts and minds. So I'm going to move a little fast because I think I spent a lot of time up front, which was worth it, but I'm going to go through a couple of these slides a little faster. I'm happy to make these available on the Healing Advocacy Fund .org website. There's a lot of really interesting polling that you're going to hear also, I think, from Taylor about the Colorado initiative that also capitalizes on that. We have seen a huge progress at education in Oregon from the simple facts that we provided before regarding how we move people from what the hell is psilocybin to holy crap, I'm going to get grandmother on this train. This is a quick slide I want to highlight that really highlights, psychedelics have the opportunity, more so than any other issue, to transcend partisan politics. Cannabis legalization in 2014 had 2 counties in Oregon that voted yes. We had almost half of all Oregon counties vote 50% or more in favor of Measure 109 in Oregon, and I think that trend is going to continue to happen across the state. So implementation, where are we? We are at the tail end of the rulemaking phase here. It's been a long haul. I can't believe 2 years actually can feel like a decade in this process, but it does. The overall timeline, when are services going to be available? January 2nd is not when services are going to be available. Regardless of what you've read in the media, January 2nd, applications will be open, and we believe that services will be open to the general public in mid to late next year. Again, taking the intention of doing this right is incredibly important. So I want to talk a little bit about communication and the importance of it here. Elevating Oregon voices. In Oregon, there's an opportunity for cities and counties to opt out of the program if they want. We're having to run this campaign a second time at the city and county level right now. And it's been another opportunity for us to continue our education. You're not going to stop hearing that word ever here. Education is really a baseline of our success. For someone like me, you turn into the mushroom guy. When that starts to happen, literally in the news. And we started to see, conservatives and progressives stand up and say, we're not going to ask our voters to vote on this again, right? We want to move forward and create access to this problem, right? This was a staunch conservative in a conservative county in Oregon that went on the record and said, we need to throw this tool in the toolbox. We'd be stupid not to, right? And they're saying this in public to their conservative colleagues, right? And I really think that just highlights the opportunity that we have here. This was actually a progressive county that was thinking about opting out just outside of Portland. And we were able to work with the chair of that county, and she, said these things here like, you can Google it. Do 5 minutes of homework before you stand up and spew a bunch of prohibitionist nonsense. So creating and defending, thank you. So we have a lot of places that are moving forward, and I'm really happy to report that our starting number from a local perspective says that we have an opportunity to provide access to 2 million Oregonians out of the 4.2 million out of the gate. That's pretty huge. That's a big opportunity for us to capitalize on. So what is our strategy moving forward here? Communications, managing the media. You just heard a lot about that, right? We have to continue to stay out front to really drive that process. Service centers and training programs. The Healing Advocacy Fund is really starting to identify the ways in which we can provide technical support, set tables, and really create a community for shared learning. We cannot do this in silos. If we do, we will fail. That is not an option for us here in Oregon. Safety. if we cannot base this entire foundation in safety, we will be set back. And the data and research to back up the safety, and of course, the policy itself to defend and ensure that we have high quality practitioners and regulations to match. I'm also excited to announce that the first training program was just licensed and certified and is now up and running in Oregon. That's Intertrek. For those who don't know, that's Tom Eckert and his late wife, Cherie, who are the architects of Measure 109, were the first licensed training program that is now up and running, training the first 100 facilitators that will be practicing sometime later in 2023. That's a historical first that I wanted to share. Thank you. So last but not least are the principles of the Healing Advocacy Fund. You've heard me say it before. Safety, quality, and access. Designing and co-designing with all stakeholders involved. Staying coordinated with the entire community. Being responsive to all of the new problems that are going to come up on a daily basis that we need to work collectively to identify solutions for. And taking the learnings from Oregon and really sharing them with the broader community overall. So the long-term impact that we're going to have here in Oregon is that millions of Oregonians and people from everywhere else in the country can come to Oregon to really participate in this program. You know, Oregon will be a lab in which we can really continue to hone in on the accountability and ethical guidelines and really ensure that those who need access, that often have not had access from other modalities, can have it out of the gate here in Oregon. And of course, Oregon also will be the first place in the country where we will have the trifecta of psilocybin, MDMA, and ketamine available all in one place. And that's really, really exciting. And we're so excited to be working with the partners to meet in that intersection between the federal, local, and state. It's an exciting place to be. And my time is up. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you, Sam. And now we have Taylor West.
Thank you.
Taylor currently serves as the Chief of Staff for New Approach, the primary funder and strategic partner for the Natural Medicine Colorado Ballot Initiative campaign. Taylor also consults in a communications role for the Psychedelic Science Funders Collaborative and is a founding partner of Heart Plus Mind Media. She has previously served as Deputy Director of the National Cannabis Industry Association and Communications Director for National Journal. Please welcome Taylor West.
Thank you, Leah. I'm going to try to pace around here because that's how I prefer to do it, but I'm realizing that my shoes are going to make a lot of noise, so if that gets distracting, we'll try something else. Thank you for the introduction. It's really fantastic to share a stage with Sam. We've worked together quite a bit, including on the Oregon Initiative, and then back during both of our salad days in the cannabis world. Good training for jumping into this kind of policy change as well. As Leah said, I am the Chief of Staff for New Approach. I'm going to start off the presentation just by explaining a little bit about who New Approach is, because it can be confusing to understand all the different entities that are involved, particularly in the Colorado Ballot Initiative. New Approach is a political organization that has been operating for more than a decade now, primarily in the first 10 years focused on supporting cannabis ballot initiatives. So policy reform around cannabis focused on creating criminal justice, as well as ending, essentially, the war on drugs as it relates to cannabis. It was founded by Graham Boyd in 2010 with a founding donor who was interested in creating a really data-driven, successful way to run these ballot initiatives. And New Approach has been behind most, not all, but most of the successful statewide cannabis ballot initiatives over the last 10 years. In 2020, we got introduced to Tom and Cherie Eckert, who Sam mentioned earlier were the architects of Measure 109 in Oregon. Saw an opportunity to partner with them, take their incredible ideas and passion and dedication to bringing psilocybin therapy, making it more broadly accessible, combine that with our experience in running these sorts of policy initiatives and winning them, and make that a successful partnership in Oregon. New Approach is almost entirely funded by philanthropy. As you can see in this graph, much of our work, because the first decade was cannabis work, we had our founding donor and founding donor's family that make up more than half of the 85 million that we have dispersed on behalf of ballot initiative campaigns over the last 12 years. And then in recent years, we're starting to see an uptick in psychedelic philanthropy, which is incredible and amazing. These things don't get done without those folks. And then that tiny little red sliver that you can barely see is the little bit of funding that we've received from people who are associated with a company that is starting to work in the psychedelic space. And I'll tell you a secret, which is that I actually had to bump up the percentage on this graph because otherwise the sliver wasn't even visible on the graph. So it's actually, that sliver represents a larger proportion than what we have actually received from the industry itself. So the point here really is that this is an organization, New Approach is an organization that is funded by people who genuinely are doing this to see access expanded to more people who recognize the potential of this healing and believe that others should have access to it as well. I also want to explain a little bit about sort of the parallel paths here between the state policy reform efforts and the clinical research and FDA efforts that we know are happening and are so incredibly valuable. We very much believe that these are parallel paths, not conflicting paths, and I believe that our partners on the FDA approval track agree. Prescription access is an incredibly important priority for this field. It will bring credibility in ways that nothing else can. It will open up opportunities for people with very specific and severe diagnoses to access treatment through healthcare facilities and through, hopefully through insurance coverage in the near future. So it has an incredibly important role to play. But we also believe that therapeutic access is also important, and that can happen most effectively through these state policy reforms that we're doing. Not only does it move significantly quicker than an FDA process and significantly less expensively than an FDA process, but it also opens up the kind of healing that we see beyond specific diagnoses. And that's sort of what I'm getting at here with this graph, is that once you are opening it up to people without having to go through the medical model, then you start to see these therapies being used not only for treating particular conditions, but actually preventing them. I like to make the analogy to physical therapy. If you blow out your knee, you go to physical therapy to help rebuild it. But a lot of people who are very active and know they're doing activities that put their knee at risk will do physical therapy ahead of time to strengthen the muscles around that and try to avoid getting injured in the first place. I think that kind of resilience is something that we can build with psychedelic therapy, and state policy reform allows us to do that. So a lot of what Sam has already covered, I won't recap, except to say that New Approach was a partner with Sam and the rest of the campaign on what was truly groundbreaking and history-making in Oregon. We started at something like 40% of people saying they would vote yes, and ended at 56%, which is a remarkable shift in the political world. It's just not something you see very much anymore. Following that and seeing how successful that had been and taking the lessons that we had learned, we looked around for where we could do this next to continue this momentum. And for reasons that I will start to talk about here in the next couple of slides, Colorado was really the no-brainer in this situation. So we are now creating in Colorado the first program that will take what Oregon is building with psilocybin and expand on it. We'll start with psilocybin in Colorado, but the initiative also includes directives to, about 2 years after the psilocybin program is fully established, an advisory board and the regulatory agency in the state government will begin to look at expanding that to DMT ayahuasca, mescaline, excluding peyote for conservation purposes, and ibogaine. And this is really exciting because we know that lots of people who benefit from these compounds have different responses to different compounds, and being able to open up more of these medicines is incredibly important. This is also important well beyond the borders of Colorado, right? One state is a breakthrough. That was Oregon. 2 states is momentum. 3 is a trend. We're headed that direction, not quite there yet. But getting this second state is such an important way to signal to people that this is something that's coming. This is not stopping. This was not a one-off. This is happening. And that's why this is so big for the entire field and not just the state of Colorado. So why Colorado? It's an initiative-friendly state, meaning that we can change laws with a ballot initiative. Voters go to the polls, they vote on it. If they approve it, then the state has to move forward with it, whether they like it or not. It's one of the beautiful things. It also allows us to design the program with a lot of detail, rather than leaving it up to a legislative process where you get a lot of cooks in the kitchen and things tend to get muddled. Colorado also has a large veteran population, which we know is an important population to serve with these therapies. It has an active psychedelic advocacy community, and they were already working toward policy change along these lines. You may know Denver made psilocybin lowest law enforcement priority a couple of years ago, and that group, the folks who worked on that, were also kind of prepped and ready to start doing a broader statewide campaign. And then, because we are very, very data-driven, we don't jump into a state without doing some viability testing and polling. And early on, we did viability polling around a few different potential psychedelic therapy policies and had, really encouraging numbers. 62% of Coloradans said they would support a regulated access program for psychedelics. So that gave us a lot of confidence to go into the state. So what does the initiative do? It is very similar to the Oregon initiative with a few sort of expansions. But the goal here is to create careful, regulated access to psychedelic healing. It is limited to adults 21 and up. It involves on-site guided sessions with trained, licensed facilitators. These medicines will be produced on-site at healing centers, or the healing centers can obtain them from other healing centers that are producing. But it is a closed-loop system in terms of where the medicines are coming from. And they are administered on-site at the healing centers, and clients are not able to leave the healing center until the effects of the medicine have worn off. All of this is obviously about safety. It's about making sure that people have a facilitated and guided experience, and hopefully the most productive experience they can have in terms of coming to revelations or helping meet their intentions for the session. There are important guardrails written in: no retail sales, no dispensaries, pre-screening in order to both match facilitator levels, facilitator experience levels with the potential challenges that a client is facing, as well as contraindications if there are health risks that need to be identified. And as I said, clients have to remain at the healing center while they're in the altered state. The Colorado Initiative also does remove criminal penalties for non-commercial personal use, cultivation, and sharing of plant-based psychedelics. As Sam mentioned, in Oregon, there was actually a separate initiative running at the same time that decriminalized all drugs. So that piece of it was sort of covered by that other initiative. We don't have that currently running in Colorado. And so in order to make sure that no one is being treated as a criminal for seeking healing, there is this decriminalization element. It provides some respect for community-based use, while still essentially focusing primarily on the regulated access program that we believe will bring in a lot more people outside of what is currently a somewhat small bubble of folks who are comfortable in the sort of psychedelic underground, if you want to call it that. But it also creates, by decriminalizing, we create greater accountability, greater opportunities for education, and safety for community-based use. In a bad situation, Once this is no longer a criminalized practice, there's an easier way for people to make sure that anyone who's causing harm in the community is held accountable for that, and that it's made clear. So in passing this initiative, Coloradans will gain access to this incredible treatment option, as well as people who travel to Colorado. Just much like Oregon, it's not limited to Colorado residents. And as I said, the influence expands far beyond the borders of the state by really setting a standard. We believe, frankly, that this model for natural psychedelics is, in many ways, the gold standard that other states can follow as we move forward towards expanding legal access for people. You know, it covers all 4 of the major natural psychedelics. It creates a lot of opportunity for people to receive this treatment, and it maintains the safeguards and guardrails that keep public opinion solidly behind it. So we did polling in July, once we had the initiative drafted and qualified for the ballot, which is not a small process in itself, but I won't bore you with those details. Once we knew we were going to be on the ballot, we did another poll to see where things stand. And you can see here, sorry, I'm realizing that one of my graphs, the text dropped down a little bit. The yellow bar is folks who say probably yes. The orange bar is definitely yes. The gray bar is probably definitely no. So we did a little bit of testing where we read the ballot title to folks, asked them to vote. Then we gave them a lot of positive messaging. Here's why this is a good idea. Here's the research. And then we delivered a series of attacks, basically negative messages that we would expect to see. And as you can see, when we start out, we are, between the probablys and the definitelys, we are at a majority. We're at 60%, which is fantastic. After positive messaging, our definitely yes went up to 55%. It's incredible. People are unbelievably open to this, especially once you explain. And then that support is durable. Even after attacks, we still stay at 52% definite. Now, I should say there is such a thing we refer to as the diving board effect, which is that as you get closer to an election, people who say they support a ballot initiative often kind of back away a little bit. So we wouldn't expect these numbers to hold entirely in November, but it's still a great sign that we have a good issue, a good message, and one that is able to withstand attacks. There are 3 pillars to the messaging, and I'm going to wrap this up with showing you 2 ads that we're running for the campaign. The 3 pillars of our messaging are starting with mental health. Everyone understands that we're in a crisis, and whether they have their own crisis or a personal connection to someone, everyone feels connected to the mental health crisis. You start with that. You get people open to the idea, and then you reassure them. You reassure them with research, and you reassure them with safeguards, with the fact that this is a controlled program that has thoughtful design. And we have developed ads that specifically address those. This first ad I'm going to show you is actually an educational ad. It does not mention the initiative itself, but just educates people about psychedelic therapy and the way that it can be beneficial for people. And it was sponsored by Heroic Hearts Project, which is a nonprofit that connects veterans with psychedelic services. So I'll just take a moment and show this to you.
I was a Navy SEAL for 11 years. I was medically retired. I was on 12 different medications, 2 antipsychotics, 3 antidepressants, 3 anti-anxiety meds. I didn't want help. I wanted to hurt. But natural psychedelic medicine therapy was a breakthrough. Natural psychedelic medicine therapy is regulated, and it's not for recreational use. It gave me a life back when I was lost. This medicine, it makes sense.
Yeah. I want to express, first of all, just amazing amounts of gratitude to Chris Maddox, who is the veteran featured in this ad. The emotion on his face in this ad is not made up. It was genuinely making himself very vulnerable in front of the camera in a way that we all should be very grateful for. It means a lot. It is incredibly impactful, and I'm sure it was not an easy thing for him to do. But it also speaks to just how powerful these stories can be. This is an ad that's running right now, and at fairly high volumes in Colorado. And one thing that's important to remember is the rest of us, all of us in this room, know a lot about psychedelic therapy. Most of the people that are going to see this ad, this is going to be one of the first times that they've heard someone share a story like that. And to be able to deliver that message to people and that be sort of the first thing that they hear is incredibly powerful beyond the campaign and moves into really starting to shape the way people think about this. And then we will finish the campaign with a sort of closing argument ad that is specific to the initiative and that talks about the research and the safeguards that we know are important for reassuring voters that this is a good idea. So I will show.
As a physician, I see evidence of our mental health crisis every day. Medications and talk therapy help some, but not everybody. Now, promising research from Johns Hopkins show that natural psychedelic medicines can be twice as effective for depression and anxiety as current treatments.
It's regulated therapy, not for sale to bring home. For my patients, natural medicine could be another treatment option. Yes on 122 brings healing and hope.
And what we tested these ads is they work. We did an ad test where we started at 49% yes, and once we showed either of these ads, we're up to 61%. That's a pretty dramatic jump, and you can see the 54% ad there is kind of another one that was not bad, but you can really see how the Chrismatics ad and Scott Shannon and Heather together really bumped up the results. So I'm going to skip the what we're watching because I have already gone over time, but we are in these last few weeks. The election is on November 8th. We are feeling good about where we are. We are still raising a little bit of money, so if you are interested in helping support these ads being on television and all your streaming options, please don't hesitate to find me afterwards. But thank you all for being here, and thank you for your commitment to this work.
Thank you, Taylor. Patrick Burke hails from Buffalo and was first elected to represent the 142nd Assembly District in 2019. Assemblymember Burke's notable legislative accomplishments include a ban on microbead plastics, a repeal of Sunday blue laws, a $1 million emergency fund created to combat the opioid crisis. He also introduced legislation that would make pharmaceutical industries pay to keep local drinking water free of medical waste. Assemblymember Burke sponsors A8569A, a bill that would amend the public health law to allow for the medical use of psilocybin and MDMA in a controlled therapeutic setting. Assemblymember Pat Burke.
Thank you. Do I have to press a button? Can you hear me? Yes? Everyone, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here, and Taylor and Sam, thank you. It's honestly really encouraging. Sometimes in this business, even though it's great to be here together, you can feel alone, and the extraordinary amount of work that it takes to get these things accomplished, it's a grind. And to see you guys running these sophisticated, smart, well-invested campaigns, and to invest yourselves and your lives in it, I really appreciate you, and I just want to thank you, and I want to give them a round of applause as well. So again, I'm Assemblyman Pat Burke, and I hail from Buffalo, New York. Go Bills. I have to get that out there every time, go Bills. And generally, I wouldn't be the person that people would presume would carry a bill like this, right? You would assume someone from New York City, maybe a more liberal area would be the one carrying it. Now, I'm a Democrat, I'm a progressive Democrat, but Buffalo wouldn't seem to be where you would carry something like this. And this is where I like to share a personal anecdote so you get to know me and you understand why I'm doing this. But when it comes to psilocybin, I'm a lawmaker, not a lawbreaker, so I can't share my personal experience because I don't have any. But what I would like to do is tell you about a friend of mine who is a good friend of mine who's also a lawmaker. Now this friend of mine, he came from a rough neighborhood, like pretty rough and tumble neighborhood, and in a poor neighborhood. So when you grow up in a setting like that, it's sort of inherent that there's going to be violence and there's going to be trauma and there's going to be all these things that happen. And my friend didn't realize, because when you just live that life, you don't think it's anything, you just think that's normal, until he kind of moved into a different setting and realized that maybe there were some things they had to work on, right? So my friend was telling me about an instance when he was at a park in this, now I guess a little bit more affluent, nicer, safer neighborhood, and a group of guys started walking towards him off of the basketball court. And he had presumed that they were going to try and fight him. They were going to try and jump him. And so in his head, he went through the process of what he'd have to do, and because it had happened so many times before growing up. And the guys coming by him looked at him and were just sort of like, hey, how's it going? Because they saw he was being a certain way, and it made my friend realize that something wasn't right and it had to be addressed. So my friend started looking into different treatment options and came across psilocybin, went through that experience, and at this time, my friend was already an elected official. And in the world of politics, you throw sharp elbows. It's not an easy world to be in. It's just you're always under attack. Even if you're trying to accomplish good things, they're under attack, not for the cause, but just for the politics of it. And so my friend had a political rival, sort of a guy that they just had a lot of contempt for each other. There's news articles about these two going at each other. And so my friend takes psilocybin for the first time, and he starts thinking about his political rival. And instead of thinking about the contempt he had for him or the anger towards him, he started thinking about his very human characteristics and the good things about this person. And so he sent him a text saying, I know we don't always get along, but I just want you to know I think you're really smart. I think you're really good at debating. There's a lot of things I appreciate about you. And these two people who had been at each other's throats for 5 years, the other guy sent something back almost immediately, like, oh my God, thank you so much for saying that. Well, these are the things I thought about you. And my friend and this rival, they're never going to be great, right? They're still where they are, but they started seeing each other as people instead of just enemies. And the connection that made, and when my friend told me that story, it made me realize that I had to do something to make sure other people had access to this, so other people could heal, so other people not just heal, but thrive, right? Like to create a world where everyone's doing better. Paul Wellstone was a famous senator from Minnesota who tragically died in a plane crash many years ago. And he had a great saying, we all do better when we all do better. And so that's been a core ethos for me. And I see this treatment, this medicine, as an opportunity for everyone to do better. So that's where, so that, just so you know, that's where I'm coming from for why I do this. And but I'll also admit, as a politician, as an elected official, you have to know a little bit about a lot of things, right? So you touch in so many things. So this is one of my major priorities, but I have a couple other significant priorities. So when developing this bill, I go off of what really smart people have already done and have already sort of tipped their toe in the water and are testing these things out. So this bill creates a therapeutic model for psilocybin and MDMA in New York State. And I'm aware of the significance of a state like New York accomplishing something like this, because New York is the 12th largest economy in the world. It's an extraordinarily, if it were its own country, it'd be a pretty big, pretty wealthy, pretty powerful country. So getting this done in New York, in a place that it's a liberal state. We all know it's a liberal state, right? But it's not when it comes to drug policy. So cannabis, for an example. Cannabis has taken extraordinary effort and extraordinary resources and time for a place that it's an issue that's pretty popular. So over the last 3 years prior to cannabis being approved for recreational use, we did a search of it. There was an investment, a lobbying investment of $500 million to get cannabis passed in New York. And that shouldn't be necessary, and it won't be necessary for my bill. Don't worry, don't worry. But it takes work, and it takes a lot of really smart people and committed people. And I think this is the model that can pass and can have people engaged and excited in the state of New York. Now Kevin had talked about some of the clashes that could also happen, right? So maybe it's not everything we want to see. It's not decrim. It doesn't address decrim because I don't think that is. I know that isn't politically feasible in New York State right now. But it gets us really, really far, and it creates enough access for people that it starts to take away that stigma. We're seeing the stigma taken away through research and through news articles and through the great work that so many people are doing. But just having people have that medicine and having people be okay and having a loved one that is then okay, I think it moves the needle dramatically, and that's really what I'm trying to do. A really, really, really big first step. Sam said, we don't need home runs right away, right? Maybe a single, maybe a double. I think this is a triple. I think it's really good, and I'm really, really excited about where it's going and what we can do. And I didn't have a slideshow. They asked me to do slides, and my staff insisted I do slides. I'm like, I'm not doing slides. I'm terrible at slides. I'm not doing it. So this is me, connecting with you. I want to engage with you and look forward to working with you and look forward to working with my friends here. And this is my first time being in this sort of group setting with so many like-minded folks. So it's really exciting for me. And just thank you all for what you do and for being here and for listening to me talk for a little bit.
So we have 7 precious minutes to get through.
Your name tag, I think, is what they're. Just this.
What do you want?
I'll take the vent off.
Oh, you want me to take it off?
They just like it better for the photos and things. Oh, I'm on mic now. Hey, everybody.
I have to take the whole ear thing off. There we go. Can you take this?
Yes.
While they're doing that, I have a public service announcement.
Teamwork.
More,
Collaborative efforts.
Thank you.
well done, gentlemen, well done. For Kevin Baltic, I have your phone. You're welcome. So I'm going to try and group some of these together. The first one has to do with access to communities of color and LGBTQ, and what is being done to ensure that those communities will have equal access.
Do you want me to get the phone?
I mean, I can speak to my bill. So my bill has frankly, I didn't want to go through all the work of doing this legislation. I knew it was going to take and potential sacrifices, both for my time and potentially politically, that the cost could be, without making it accessible to everyone. So I think these types of medicines have often been seen as sort of a rich white person's drug, and I'm not about that. So we have a several $million fund in the bill that would to bridge the gap between the insurance issues that hopefully will be rectified in the next few years, so that people on Medicaid and veterans and first responders all have hopefully cost-free access to it.
Yeah.
Sam or Taylor, you want to?
Yeah. So one of the things that the Healing Advocacy Fund is working on right now is assembling opportunities to provide direct grants and scholarships to training programs first that are focused on creating access, as I've said before, within their own communities by people in their communities, right? There's an order of operations here. I think it's very common for people to say, how are we going to create access for the people in need? That's a very valid question and an important one. And we cannot answer that question correctly if we do not understand that in order to support the people who need access, we have to support the people who are going to provide that access and make sure that they have all of the training and support they need, and the schools that are training those people. So there's an order of operations here. It doesn't happen overnight, but if we are focused and methodical, and we apply logic to solving this in addition to all of the emotion that is stepping up to this challenge that has not been solved within the traditional healthcare system, that is the challenge, that is our opportunity, and that's something that the Healing Advocacy Fund in Oregon is absolutely working on in terms of continuing to raise all kinds of funds and provide technical support for these programs to be able to create access to those communities who have traditionally not had them in the past.
And I'll just add very quickly on top of that, I mean, the program that we're running in Colorado is going to have similar focuses, but more broadly, these state policy reform efforts, opening up this therapy outside of the medical model is yet another way that we are increasing access, because when you create an avenue that is not purely medical, does not require a specific diagnosis or a path through the healthcare system, then you do make it more accessible, more diverse, and create opportunity for more people to both practice and to receive the treatment.
Thanks so much. Is it ethical, this is interesting, is it ethical to say that it's only safe in therapy settings when research shows that psilocybin is safe for home use?
That's a very fair question, and I think I don't think that the message is that it is only safe in these situations. And in fact, because we have sort of the decrim portion of the initiative, I think that is tacit acknowledgement that people are certainly capable of having experiences outside of that regulated access model. However, we also know that especially for people who have not had experiences with psychedelics before, or perhaps have had relatively light dose experiences, that when you start talking about a therapeutic dose that is a significant experience, that it is really important and helpful for people to have an experienced facilitator working with them through that process. Now, that person doesn't have to be a medical professional in the licensed, credentialed sense. Both the Oregon and Colorado initiatives were designed to allow people to become trained and licensed as facilitators regardless of what their prior background is. Because we recognize that people who are skilled at this, as Sam said, are not necessarily the ones who have a million letters after their names, but are the people who can hold that space with empathy and skill. That we want people to have that option, and we also believe that by providing that option, we get a lot more people in the door right from the start.
I guess I would just add, so the question was it ethical to pretty much create the barrier? So perhaps not ideal, and again, just as I'm an elected official, but I teach politics at SUNY Buffalo State, and I teach a practical political course. And so I would say, oftentimes it's not ideal because it's going to. Anytime you create a barrier to something that people potentially need, it's not the best, right? But having it not accessible to anyone is even worse. And so I would guess the other ethical, if you're flipping it, is it ethical to not get done what you can get done, which you know could potentially save people's lives or make people's lives dramatically better, even if you can't make it accessible to everyone right away? So I guess for me, I think it's a moral imperative to do as much as I can right now. And we have some military folks in the back. General Patton, he was famous for saying, "A good plan now is better than a great plan later." So So I'm going to do what's in front of me now. I'm going to do everything I can with the thing that I have right now to help as many people right now. And I hope it means that sets the stage for even more people to be helped in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you guys all. I just want to acknowledge there are so many good questions. You guys are amazing. These are wonderful. I'm so sorry that we can't get to more of them, but please give a round of applause for our panelists.